Welcome once again to Dialogue on Public Issues. I'm John Chowney with Campbellsville University. Kentucky voters will be going to the polls on November 5th to choose a governor and several other statewide constitutional officers. We are continuing our series of interviews with candidates for those offices. All candidates have been invited, and today we're very pleased to be interviewing our incumbent Kentucky Agricultural Commissioner, the Honorable Ryan Quarles, the Republican and candidate for re-election. Welcome.
Good day. Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you back. You've been a frequent guest of ours through the years. Tell our voters a little bit about yourself. I think you're pretty well known in this part of Kentucky.
Well, never know about that, but I come from Scott County, grew up on a family farm, tobacco and cattle operation. We continue to farm today, about 1,300 acres, and I get on the farm as often as I can, still grow tobacco, so that brings me back down to earth really quick. Served a couple terms in the Kentucky legislature where I served on the Agriculture Committee, and for the past 3.5 years or so, been serving as the Commissioner of Agriculture, ran statewide in 2015, and since then, I have had my dream job. I've always loved agriculture, I love policy making, and for me, in this moment in time, I get to do both every single day. I love being an advocate for our family farmers, all 76,000 farms we have in our state. But I also take time to make sure that we connect with consumers, those that may be a little distant from the farm economy, folks that are consumers every day, hopefully 3 times a day, but may not completely understand where their food comes from. And so for me, it's more than just servicing the agriculture community. It's about servicing all of Kentucky, regardless of your background, to make sure people realize the economic impact that agriculture has in our state. $45 billion, 200,000 jobs, and in some areas of the state, we continue to grow and create new jobs, such as industrial hemp, better management of our forests and woodlands, and of course, making sure that Kentucky maintains a competitive advantage on research, on innovation, and giving young people the inspiration to choose agriculture as a career.
Now, why did you decide to run again?
Well, I love my job, and when I ran 4 years ago, I was hopeful that we would be able to get through some major achievements, which I believe we've done, but I knew that the job wasn't done in just one term, and so I am committed to the agriculture community. Our farmers wanted stability in the office. That's something that they asked for 4 years ago. And so hopefully I can maintain that sense of approval among our farm community, but also continue to branch out. And so for me, there are several items that I would like to continue and improve upon if given the chance to serve another term.
Now, you were recently just selected nationally to tell us about that new leadership position you assumed within the national organization.
Well, earlier this month, I was honored to be selected by my peers, the other agriculture commissioners, secretaries, and directors across the entire country in our territories to serve as vice president of NASDA, which is the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. So essentially, I'm serving as number 2 among all the state departments in a nonpartisan way to work with the administration on issues ranging from labor to EPA issues to emerging technologies, rural broadband. And so I'm just very honored to be selected by my peers to serve as vice president, which hasn't been done in Kentucky since Billy Ray Smith in the early 2000s. And so I'm happy that Kentucky has a seat at the table, especially when it comes to addressing national, rural, and agriculture issues.
Are there particular Kentucky commissioners that you would model your tenure after?
I think Billy Ray Smith set the gold standard of how Department of Agriculture should be run. I remember when I was in middle school at the state fair, participating in contests, that Commissioner Smith was there passing out ribbons, and that's why every state fair I'm there too, following in his footsteps. Not every commissioner has chosen to do that, but I have a real strong connection, particularly with our youth programs, 4-H and FFA. It wasn't for either 4-H or FFA, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at today. But I think Commissioner Smith did a really good job. But times have changed. I have about half the employees that he had when he left office, and we have bigger regulatory responsibilities. And so the Department of Agriculture has changed over the years, but I still think that he did a really good job, and I keep in touch with him today.
What are the primary duties of the commissioner's role?
Well, the number one objective is to promote Kentucky agriculture, whether that being connecting farmers with markets, such as farmers markets, or advocating for certain technologies that the farm community needs, or making sure that we have a pipeline of future agriculture leaders, the Commissioner of Agriculture needs to serve as that constant cheerleader for the 76,000 farms populating all 120 counties. Agriculture does exist in our metropolitan areas, but the number one goal is to promote what's best about our state. And there's a lot of things that we can brag about. We're the biggest beef cattle state east of Mississippi. We're a top grain state in the United States. A lot of folks don't realize that. We continue to be a livestock-oriented state. Over half of our farm receipts come from livestock enterprises, including the poultry industry, which continues to grow. And of course, if you go around the world and say you're from Kentucky, they're going to ask you about three things. They're going to ask you about bourbon, agriculture product.
Right.
They're going to ask you about racehorses, agriculture product. And of course, they're going to ask you about Colonel Sanders. And that is our reputation. And so for me, I'm going to continue to be an advocate, not just for our farm families, but also rural Kentucky, and how can we better connect with urban areas in our state.
Now, how many states now elect the agricultural leader?
There are 12 states, plus the other 38 plus the territory, so a total of 53, but only 12 of us are elected. It's a different selection process.
Right.
In other states, the ag commissioner, director, or secretary serve as a gubernatorial member of their cabinet. I think it's good that we elect the agriculture commissioner because it gives, particularly rural Kentucky, a voice on who's going to be in that office. It also gives me the ability to assert constitutional independence from the rest of the executive branch. And we've had to do that a few times while in an office. And I think that's a good thing for us.
Give me an example.
Well, we are dependent on information technology, IT. We maintain, support, and invent over 100 different technical applications so that our folks in the field, such as gas pump inspectors, are able to better do their jobs. And there's been instances where we have had to say, hey, we're going to do it our own. It's more efficient for us to do it than rather going to go through the rest of state government where it's going to be more costly. It may not get done in a more timely manner. And I feel that that's an opportunity for us to say, hey, we can do it better. Give us farmers a chance, and we can do it better ourselves.
Give us kind of a summary of what the Ag Department in Kentucky does.
That's a great question. A lot of folks obviously focus on the meat and potatoes.
Sure.
Our farm having a presence on the farm level. But beyond being an advocate, the Department of Agriculture has a lot to do with marketing Kentucky, and that means Kentucky Proud. The Kentucky Proud program, we run it at the Department of Ag. The Industrial Hemp program, completely underneath my department. Anything you see on hemp in Kentucky is my department and my dedicated employees. We're also at regulation over specialty crops such as ginseng in Kentucky. We help run shows and fairs, over $1 million of premiums and support for county fairs. Our 90 county fairs goes through our office. Then if you look over at animal disease, we also have the Office of State Veterinarian. So any animal disease among livestock, not your pets, but among livestock, we have jurisdiction over, which is a big deal, especially when you're dealing with the cattle industry, poultry industry. Oh, and by the way, the horse racing industry, where we have horses constantly coming in and out of quarantine, has to go through our office. That's a big, big responsibility for us. And of course, half of the employees at the Department of Agriculture are inspectors. We are a consumer protection agency. And so I like to tell people that if you weigh your truck on the side of the interstate, if you were to buy or sell gold at a pawn store, if you were to rent an inflatable for your backyard birthday party, ride a Ferris wheel, fly out of any Kentucky airport, it's the Kentucky Department of Agriculture that plays a consumer protection role. And you may have seen one of the inspection stickers, particularly at our 60,000 gas pumps across the state. But next time you go to a grocery store or Walmart, check out the inspection that we do to make sure that when you check out, there's actually a correlation between the price at checkout and the price on the shelf as well. And so a lot of folks may not realize that, but about half of our employees don't have offices. They work out of their truck, rain, sleet, snow, hot days, cold days. And so my hat's off to our hardworking employees. But a lot of folks don't realize how big of a footprint the Department of Agriculture has, particularly beyond the farm gate.
In this election, the general election, you have an opponent.
Yes.
A gentleman from your home county, Scott County. Why are you the best choice in this election?
Well, I think it's because my opponent keeps telling me I'm doing a great job. I grew up with his sons. He's a big supporter of mine. He continues to tell me that. And he also tells me he's ready to switch parties to the Republican Party, which I find odd when he decided to run for this office. I'm not worried about him. I'm more so focused on the record that I have. I have a record that I can stand on. Kentucky Proud has grown immensely. We have the best hemp program in America. We continue to have a seat at the table, particularly with this administration. I've met directly with President Trump in the White House. I have those networks and connections. And furthermore, I feel like I have been able to foster a relationship one farmer at a time, one consumer at a time, one farmer's market at a time, to help be a voice, a responsive voice in Frankfurt, which sometimes it's a labyrinth there. And I think that we have done a good job of not only picking up the baton at the Department of Agriculture, but taking it to the next level. And if there's ever a qualification for running for Commissioner of Agriculture, is that you have some Kentucky dirt on your boots. And I grew up on a Kentucky farm, and I'm really proud of that heritage. That's something that I wouldn't trade for the world. I'm not out there as often as I used to be, but I don't have to be, because I'm out there putting the tailgate down on countless family farms across Kentucky almost every single day, and learning and listening to them, and hopefully being effective in Frankfurt.
Are there any particular issues in this campaign that you're addressing? Or I guess a better way of putting it, what are the issues in this campaign from your standpoint?
Well, number one is economic development. We want to make sure that we help promote Kentucky agriculture as a job creation apparatus. And unfortunately, there still are some folks that kind of put agriculture on the back burner for unneeded reasons. And when a farm decides to expand, or an agribusiness decides to plant roots in Kentucky, such as our 200 plus new hemp companies, those are jobs. It doesn't matter whether or not it's a factory job or a farm job. You're still employing people and helping build the economy. Since I've been in office, we have grown over 500 full-time jobs in hemp alone. We have continued to see an expansion of the poultry industry in Kentucky. Oh, and by the way, we have more farmers markets than ever, helping connect consumers, hopefully, with an emerging face in their hometown so they can help better source food locally. We've also talked a lot in this campaign about locally grown food with our school systems. Just imagine a day when our school systems look towards local farmers first before getting on a website and ordering food from an unknown destination. Another issue that has come up a lot on this campaign is being able to get government out of the way. And a lot of farmers, when asked, say, just let us farm. And that's something that I'm going to do. And that's something that really kind of contrasts me from my opponent. My opponent actually wants to add more government to the hemp program and create a quota system, which would not be effective if Kentucky were the only state to implement this. And I don't think it's wise to restrict an industry that's just getting off the ground, one that has a lot of kinks that needs to be worked out. Whereas my view towards industrial hemp is that anybody who wants to grow it, as long as you comply with federal law and apply through a program, you get the opportunity to grow. We don't have to go through a quota system and more bureaucracy. Let's let this industry thrive.
What are hemp products? What are the most common hemp products? I mean, we're all seeing CBD oil,
Right.
and that's probably the most prevalent, probably a cure-all for everything. The claims being made, at least by some producers.
There's something there. It's working. We need more research. We are actively asking for more research to know exactly what is there. But we expect there to be over $100 million in hemp sales that come from Kentucky farms and processors this year in America. And this gives Kentucky the opportunity to be first in something instead of last. And so the vast majority of our sales are CBD and cannabinoid products. And we have some of the best processors in the country right here doing it right. They're going to be around for the long term. We also see an expansion in the grain area where people are making protein shakes. People are selling it in Kroger now. You can put it. People are putting it on their salads. We have companies making makeup out of hemp grain as well. And oh, by the way, it's like soybeans. You can press it. It's an oil seed, and people are using the hemp oil, not to be confused with CBD oil, for natural lubricants, adhesives, et cetera, et cetera. Then finally, on the fiber side, we see promise in the long term. It appears that hemp fiber has a lower bacterial count than other fibers, so there could be a tremendous use for this in the healthcare industry. We have a house that was made out of hempcrete. And of course, with hemp fiber, we're also seeing some research being done on the livestock side, potential uses for bedding, et cetera. And so it's a very versatile crop. We still see an explosion and no lack of enthusiasm across Kentucky. And so we hope that with 1,000 farmers in 2019, 200 hemp companies, 500 full-time jobs, and $100 million in sales, I hope that we're just getting started.
Now, how many farmers did you say are raising hemp now?
About 1,000
About
farmers,
1,000.
up from 200 last
Right.
year.
Now, and that will be 1,020 this year.
This year,
And how many
2019.
in 2020?
Well,
Do
the
we know yet?
application, we won't know yet, and that's one thing that we're changing is that we're making it more streamlined. We're going to digitize it, have a website and a computer program so people can get online and more easily apply. And so if people are interested in growing hemp or processing hemp, we encourage them to contact us, the Department of Agriculture, particularly during the months of October and November.
And the federal government has now lifted restrictions on that, and that has really
That's right.
given a great impetus, as I understand.
One of the shining points during my administration so far was being invited to the White House by President Trump to be with him and our congressional delegation when hemp was legalized for the first time in over 70 years on December 20th of last year. And I was so happy to be there because Kentucky's led the way. And just as recently as last week, Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue said that when they have questions about hemp, they call Ryan Quarles in Kentucky. And sometimes it puts some more gray hair on my head, but every day is a challenge. And if there's ever a state that's going to capture the economic potential of this crop, it's going to be Kentucky, its natural home. With one caveat, there's still a lot of risk in the market. Those 200 hemp companies that I mentioned earlier, they're all startups by definition. There's still significant issues, particularly with the FDA, about the future of some of these products. And so we're not resting on our laurels. We are extremely active on the policy level. And we're on the phone with Washington, D.C. almost every day. And that's something that you're going to continue to have if reelected, is an advocate on the national level for not just hemp, but other crops and commodities and livestock groups as well.
What other, you and I have discussed this in prior interviews, what other crops are on the horizon for Kentucky farmers?
Well, we are beginning to bring back hops. Kentucky, believe it or not, was a leading hops producing state before Prohibition, particularly on the Ohio River. And over the past 3 years, and due to a research grant that I helped secure with the federal government, we now have about 16 commercial hops farms in Kentucky. And with the buy local movement continuing to grow and the growth of our craft beer industry, which, by the way, has a $500 million impact in Kentucky each year, that's another crop we're looking at. We're also looking at Canaf, which is a fibers plant that's similar to hemp but no THC issues. It has a higher BTU rating than firewood, and we have some research being done, particularly in eastern Kentucky, on that. But one of the coolest things we've done in the first 3 years was help connect farmers with markets that already exist in Kentucky, primarily the bourbon industry. And as that industry continues to explode, we have 8 million barrels aging in Kentucky. That's 2 barrels per Kentuckian almost. Required by law to buy Kentucky corn, but it doesn't tell you where they have to get it from. And in the past 3 years, we have had a 65% increase in the amount of Kentucky corn going into Kentucky bourbon. And in 2019, the first time in modern history since the 1960s, over half of the Kentucky corn that is distilled into Kentucky bourbon is coming from Kentucky farmers. And that's an accomplishment because that comprises about 6% of the entire corn crop in Kentucky.
Now, what are some of the challenges right now facing Kentucky farmers?
We have low commodity prices, stressed livestock prices, particularly in the beef industry. These are recurring issues, and every business goes through cycles.
Right.
But this has been a particularly long cycle of low commodity prices for Kentucky farmers and nationally as well. The other issue that's facing us is very, very dry conditions across the state. We're approaching drought conditions in about 20% of Kentucky right now. A lot of crops have already reached maturity. And so if you look at where the yields may be the best, it's probably going to be from Bowling Green west. Central Kentucky is extremely dry right now as well. And of course, Kentucky's a big forage state, and so that last cutting of hay may not even happen right now. And so that will compound 2020 for those farms that have cattle and other livestock. Those are two of the biggest issues. But if you were to ask me what the third one is, it's a consumer that may not know the difference between a soybean and green bean. Agriculture education is so essential. It's so essential that when you have 2% of the population feeding the rest of America, and you have 16 million Americans that honestly think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows and white milk comes from the white cows. We have an agricultural literacy issue on our hands. And so I'm so proud that my staff drives 3 education trailers across Kentucky every single day, bringing agriculture into the classroom and also explaining the science behind it, so maybe we might inspire a kid to choose agriculture as a career. Those are the issues that we've been dealing with the last few years, and hopefully we can have a turnaround. Hopefully we can have a better trade deal in place before the fall harvest to help lift up our farmers who've been adversely affected by unfair trade practices worldwide.
I know you've been involved at the national level on the trade issue, and that was going to be my next question, so you led me right into it. The impact of the tariffs and what you see happening over the next year or so in that regard, because I think everyone would agree it has had some adverse impact on farmers in general, on the agricultural economy.
So number one, Kentucky is dependent on international trade. But more importantly, the rest of the world needs our products.
Right.
So it's a two-way street. And just 3 very quick examples of that. 80% of the tobacco that we still grow ends up overseas. About 1 out of every 4 rows of corn you see in Kentucky ends up overseas. And over half of our soybeans ends up overseas. So it's so important that the American farmer, the Kentucky farmer, can market abroad. Now, the best thing that can happen trade-wise is for Congress to pass the USMCA today. I know it has to start in the House, and I know there's conversations in the month of September ongoing, but that's the best thing that could happen for Kentucky farmers.
That's the replacement of NAFTA.
That's right. NAFTA 2.0, it's a very pro-agriculture deal for Kentucky, almost tariff-free. And what will happen if that is passed by the House and then the Senate and then signed by the President is that it's going to demonstrate to the rest of the world that we're able to complete trade deals. You know, the United States only has trade deals with 20 countries in the world out of the 200 or so. It changes every year. And we just want access. And if we can pass the USMCA this year, it will demonstrate to China, hey, we're serious about our trade deals worldwide. And if I know that the administration is focusing a lot on China right now with Ambassador Lighthouser, Ambassador Greg Dowd, Ted McKinney, an Undersecretary, Department of Agriculture, a friend of mine. If we can get a better deal, a fair deal with China, it could help better the markets almost overnight. So it's important that we take care of NAFTA first, USMCA, and then hopefully hit some singles and doubles in other countries that may not get the press, like India right now. There's a lot of South American countries that have opened up trade recently. And of course, with Brexit ongoing, having a new deal with the UK would be big for us. But Japan is an area where we have an affluent consumer, 122 million residents that like to buy American already. And if we could have a FTA with Japan, which is already buying about $3 billion of pork and beef, and reduce the tariff schedule and let it be more of a free trade agreement, that could be a boon for Kentucky farmers.
Any hope of anything coming down on China? A break there?
Well, every day is a new story about China. I have confidence in the administration with negotiating with them. And I don't know if and when a trade deal will be inked, but it seems like things are thawing right now. We're getting a little bit of information here or there about the ability of them to open their markets up because, again, they need our products, and we need the ability to sell there on an open, fair market.
One thing that you have been involved in during your first term is hunger ministry in Kentucky, helping organizations, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, nowhere in the job description, nowhere in the Kentucky Constitution or KRS does it say Department of Ag needs to address food insecurity. But this is something that I take on as a moral obligation as a leader in Kentucky, is that I get the opportunity to represent Kentucky agriculture. We're blessed with an abundance of food. We're very efficient. But it's unfortunate that 1 in 6 Kentuckians and 1 in 5 Kentucky school children are food insecure. So the past few years, we've had a farm level up approach, including the farmers, our food banks, restaurants where 40% of all prepared food is thrown in a trash can. And I've had some dialogue and also some legislative wins. And just very quickly, what we have done is that we have changed the culture of giving in Kentucky. We have rewritten our Good Samaritan law so that grocery stores that used to throw away food, fearful of lawsuits, are now donating it because we fixed the law. We also have helped raise awareness, and in one night we raised $50,000 with legislators of both parties, serving food to donors, and helping raise awareness that yes, hunger does exist in every community, city, and county in Kentucky. And what we're working on now is having a culture shift among agriculture to help donate maybe a prize-winning steer, donate eggs, donate milk before the expiration period approaches, and help get food, the same quality food that you and I may enjoy, have dignity about it, and help get that in the hands of those less fortunate. And one of the coolest programs we have is a Double Dollars program, where those who are already on social assistance for WIC, SNAP, etc., can double their purchase power at a Kentucky farmer's market and be able to go down and enjoy buying a fresh tomato, pear, or apple, or some locally produced protein, and make it a little bit more affordable for them.
This question is one I always ask you when we're together. What can the commissioner do to help promote rural economic development? And you've touched on it, but I wanted to focus on it as one of the last questions.
A lot. I view the Department of Agriculture as a de facto voice for rural Kentucky. Not that we don't focus on urban areas. We do, especially with our farmers markets and food insecurity, et cetera. But when it comes to issues such as rural broadband internet, we have been at the table since day one on this. Kentucky Wired continues to approach more completion stages. And just earlier this month at SOAR, I announced the expansion of our Appalachia Proud program to more counties that fit the definition of Eastern Kentucky. But while I was there, we continue to have conversation with agriculture groups about the need for connectivity. You can't run a farm today without broadband internet, and some of the equipment we run requires it as well. We're also having conversations with our healthcare providers. You know, the rural hospital continues to have some struggling points across Kentucky. Depends on where you're at. It's important that if you want young people to move back and choose agriculture as a career, there's a lifestyle quality too that we need to catch up with, not just with internet, not just with healthcare options, but also quality of life issues. And so as a millennial, this is an issue that I take very personally because I hope that we can continue to have a Kentucky that has such a vibrant rural landscape because it helps define who we are as Kentuckians.
We're out of time. Ag Commissioner
Thank you so
Ryan
much.
Quarles, wish you the very best.
Thank you.
John Chowning with Ag Commissioner Ryan Quarles, Republican incumbent and candidate for re-election. Thank you.